Singapore Botanic Gardens is a garden in Singapore which functions as a botanic research centre, recreation space and event venue. Located about 4 kilometers northwest of city, the garden provides a space to research unique tropical plants from all over the world, in addition to provide green space in one of the densest countries in the planet. Little known to many, this is the place where the rubber industry in British Malaya was started in 1876, when a few rubber seedlings from Kew, United Kingdom arrived and planted in Singapore. How did the few rows of rubber trees in botanic gardens alter the course of history and economy in British Malaya and later Singapore and Malaysia? Let's take a walk by the wide green lawn and understand of the historical importance of Singapore Botanic Gardens. Singapore Botanic Gardens is a garden consists of jungle, curated lawns and themed gardens. Not the one with the super tall trees with the light shows at night, that one is Gardens by the Bay. Different place. The journey started at the northern entrance of Bukit Timah Gate, just next to Botanic Gardens MRT entrance. It should be an easy walk in the park on that day. Spoiler alert, the easy walk turned difficult on that day. Beyond Bukit Timah Gate and leafy shrubs, there is a lawn and eco lake. While walking in the lush green garden, you should know that the original Singapore Botanic Gardens is not here. The original Botanic Gardens was opened in 1822, just 3 years after British took over the power in Singapore from Sultanate of Johor Riau. Stamford Raffles, the Lieutenant Governor of Bencoolen, chose Singapore as the new British trading post, as the existing East India Company ports of Penang and Bencoolen were less strategically located in the region of Southeast Asia than Singapore. Based on Jackson Plan 1822 map, the Botanical and Experimental Garden was established at the northeast slopes of Fort Canning Hill, between the Flagstaff and Cantonment Plain. Today, the location of the first Botanic Gardens is partially occupied by Singapore Management University or SMU. Back to the present garden, there is a reflexology footpath which passes by a bunch of bamboo trees. While not searching for a new colony, Raffles was searching for the new species and plants. Raffles himself, as a naturalist, was interested in exotic tropical Far East plants that might be financially beneficial to his employer, the East India Company. Did you know that Raffles was also the first chairman of the Zoological Society of London, the London Zoo? Therefore, Botanic Gardens is as old as the modern Singapore, as the garden was established in the early years of the colony. However, the first botanic and experimental gardens went to decline after the death of Raffles in 1826, and the gardens was abandoned in 1829 due to insufficient funds. Today, there is little to no traces of the first botanic gardens around SMU campus and Armenian Street. The second botanic gardens was established at Tanglin in 1859 by the Agri-Horticultural Society of Singapore. The current location was chosen as it was located away from the city in the 19th century, filled with greenery and exotic trees standing tall high above the ground. The total size of Botanic Gardens in 1859 was 60 acres, which is smaller than its current size after a series of annexation of nearby lots. Beside the rubber trees is Red Brick Path, which is inside the UNESCO World Heritage Site gazetted area. By the way, not all parts of Botanic Gardens is within the World Heritage Site core area. While walking on the red brick path, here is a trivia. Why is the name Botanic Gardens is in the plural form? what are the gardens in the Botanic Garden? As early as in 1822, Botanic Gardens was divided into two main gardens, Economic Garden and Experimental Garden. Economic Garden focused on new cash crops that could be mass planted and contribute to the coffers of the colony and the British Empire. Before the rubber, the Economic Garden was focused on the price spice trees. Historically, Dutch monopolized nutmeg production in Banda Islands in the Moluccas and monopolized its trade via Dutch East Indies Company or VOC. During Napoleon's occupation of Holland in 1810, nutmeg seeds were smuggled out of Banda Islands and eventually planted in the British colonies, including in Singapore. Northwest of Fort Canning, nutmeg orchards prospered in the early 19th century between a road which is called Orchard Road after nutmeg orchards. Oh, orchard. Experimental Garden is where the rare and unique plants were researched to unlock its secret that might be beneficial to the humans and nature. Again, financial reasons caught the second Botanic Gardens into a difficult situation to survive. Thus, the Agri-Horticulture Society made a proposal to hand over the Botanic Gardens to the government in 1874, and the proposal was accepted. But you might be wondering why I came so far just to see the rubber trees. There are plenty of rubber trees to see, to look upon, all across Malaysia. Anyway, rubber tree or its scientific name Hevea brasiliensis originated from Amazon jungle in Brazil and traditionally harvested in the wild by the indigenous people. In the 19th century and early 20th century literature, Brazilian rubber was also called as Para rubber, as the state of Para in northeast of Brazil was the major producer of rubber in the early 19th century. In 1876, Sir Henry Wickham smuggled 70,000 rubber seeds from Brazil to Kew Gardens in London to be germinated. From 70,000 rubber seeds, only about 2,400 seeds were germinated and distributed across the British colonies. 50 of those rubber seedlings from Kew arrived in Singapore, but none of the plants survived. A year later, in 1877, another 22 seedlings arrived from Kew to Singapore and successfully grown. In the same year, 9 seedlings were brought from Singapore to Kuala Kangsar and planted there. Today, the oldest rubber tree in Malaysia is still alive and stands. The current rubber trees in Botanic Gardens were planted with the partnership of Michelin, the tyre manufacturer and the publisher of the foodie guide Michelin Guide. Therefore, welcome to Farming World Food and experience the food near the Botanic Gardens. Of course, there is a 1-star Michelin restaurant in Botanic Gardens, but the restaurant needs a reservation, the ingredients are non-halal and the price is way over my budget anyway. Instead, opposite of Bukit Timah Gate across the Dan An Road is Adam Road Food Centre, the location of 3 Michelin Bib Gourmand food vendors. I tried the only listed mee rebus in Michelin for the morning breakfast and the queue is so long. Back to Botanic Gardens. As such, rubber trees were planted at the former Economic Garden as rubber trees produce latex that can be sold to the industry. Other cash crops researched in the former Economic Garden includes oil palm trees and coffee from Africa and cocoa and pineapple from the Americas. Fried food, kopitiam, Milo, and pineapple juice. All of these foreign plants are planted widely across Southeast Asia and never been considered foreign anyway. Botanic Gardens occasionally had held special events such as Flower Show on the 10th and 11th of January 1884. The ticket price was $1 for the first day, 25 cents for the second day daylight, and 50 cents for the evening. In an era where a coolie worked in Botanic Gardens earned about 40 cents per day. In a wage record in 1911, The wages of coolies were about 40 to 50 cents per day, while the gardeners and specialists could earn more. For example, a coolie named Mat Jahid earned 47 cents per day. Flower Show awarded the best plants, fruits and flowers on its extensive categories, of which the contests were open to the residents of Malaya and the Strait settlements. Vanda Miss Joachim, the rarest orchid hybrid bred by Agnes Joachim, won the Flower Show of 1899 with the prize of $12 and another honor almost a century later. Other than unlocking the secrets of the local plants, Experimental Garden also conducted series of experiments with foreign plants. In one of the Botanic Gardens records in 1919, there was a record on the experiment to plant a Brazil nut tree, prized for its nut and hardwood timber. There are so many plants that are commonly found in Singapore and in Malaysia and throughout the Southeast Asia today are foreign plants, and many people did not know this. In 1888, Henry Nicholas Ridley took over the management of Botanic Gardens and held the position until 1912. By the time when Ridley took over the directorship of the Botanic Gardens, about 1,000 rubber trees already planted in the Economic Garden. Before the arrival of rubber, British plantation owners extensively planted coffee as a main cash crop in British Malaya. The planters were at first skeptical of the potential of rubber due to long growing time of at least 7 years before the trees could be tapped. In comparison, coffee trees start to bear fruit after 3 years and could be harvested repeatedly again and again and again. Due to disappointing germination efforts and slow rubber tree growth, most of the rubber trees in Kuala Kangsar were destroyed in 1889. Despite the disappointed early attempts on rubber in Malaya, Ridley madly promoted rubber as the next big thing, promise of riches, spreading fear of missing out FOMO to the British businessman, hence his nickname Mad Ridley. Intensive research in the former Economic Garden has revolutionized the way rubber is harvested, changing the fate of British Malaya by the 20th century. Previously, the rubber was harvested by a method called slaughter tapping, which a rubber tree was tapped repeatedly with machete to produce maximum latex possible. However, the method is destructive to the tree and the latex could be harvested only once before the tree dies or fell to make timber. Mad Ridley found a way to tap the rubber tree repeatedly without killing the tree, which is herringbone method. Herringbone method is the method where the bark of the rubber tree is cut using a rubber tapping knife in the fishbone pattern, the method that is widely used today. Ridley not only pioneered the most efficient methods of tapping the rubber but also how to transport the rubber seeds in the most efficient way. By putting the rubber seeds in the biscuit tin with damp charcoal. The research also found that the best time to tap the rubber is in the early morning instead of afternoon. The reason? Rubber latex dried quick in the tropical afternoon heat. At the end, Mad Ridley was right. Coffee plantations in British Malaya were devastated by the oversupply of coffee from Brazil, in addition to a disease that caused the coffee trees to die and led to failed harvest. Perhaps as a kind of retribution to Brazil that caused the demise of Malayan coffee ventures, British plantation owners planted rubber trees instead, since the rubber price was high and the condition was right. Rubber trees flourish in British Malaya due to fertile soil, suitable climate and the absence of the tree blight that makes the rubber plantation in Brazil impossible. On the demand side, the popularity of automobile, which is the cars, makes the demand of tires skyrocketed, thus the demand for rubbers to make the tires. And one of the old bungalows turned into a seed bank. 3 seeds. With the immense rubber quantity needed to be transported to the port, road alone was inadequate. Therefore, a railway network was built to link all the states in British Malaya except Terengganu. Short, old railway lines were consolidated into the wider railway network to form Federated Malay States Railway or FMSR, which is the predecessor of Kereta Api Tanah Melayu or KTM. Rubber was transported via railways to major ports such as Singapore, Port Swettenham, which is today Port Klang, and Penang. Meanwhile, Singapore becomes the center of global rubber trade with Standard Singapore Rubber or SSR becomes the standard benchmark of rubber quality up to this day. Due to extensive production of rubber in British Malaya, a specific agency on rubber was established. Rubber Research Institute of Malaya or RRIM was established in 1925 and took over the research related with rubber from Botanic Gardens. Today, RRIM stands for Rubber Research Institute of Malaysia and consolidated as Malaysia Rubber Board today. By the early 20th century, British Malaya was the largest rubber producer in the whole world. Thus, what happened to the rubber trees in the former economic garden that sparked all these transformations? According to a memo in the year 1915, the future of economic garden is in peril due to increasing cost of labor, quartering and tools. The cost was estimated to be 12,072 straight settlement dollars per annum by the year 1920. Eventually, Economic Garden was closed in the year 1925. As a result, part of the eastern portion of former Economic Garden was taken to build the Raffles College in 1925 and the college was opened in 1928. Later, Raffles College consolidated with King Edward VII College of Medicine in the year 1949 to form University of Malaya, which autonomously split between Singapore and Kuala Lumpur in the year 1959. The Singapore campus later renamed as University of Singapore in 1962, which is the National University of Singapore or NUS today. The old campus location explains why there are some well-dressed people walking in the garden in the morning. The garden path is a shortcut from the MRT station to the class. Walking into Healing Garden, which has gardens within a garden, such as Toxic Garden. However, Toxic Garden is only open for organised tour. Next to the Toxic Garden fence, there are bunches of Pipus sarmentosum leaves, or locally known as kadok in Malaysia and Indonesia, or chaplu in Thai language. If you are wondering what Pipus sarmentosum tastes like, you can watch my previous video about Hadiai, about why Malaysians and Singaporeans like to visit Hadiai, where I tried Miang Kam flavoured lace, as this leaf is used as kind of an edible wrapper. To watch this video, the link to watch is right here above. As I arrive at the welcome center, rain started to fall. Welcome center contains open air gallery, a gift shop and National Parks Board or NParks headquarters, which is the government agency that oversees the public parks and gardens in Singapore. There were less people walking in the garden in the midst of the rain, but the trees might be happy and cheerful, yay! During the Japanese occupation in the midst of World War II, the garden was renamed as Shonan Botanic Gardens to reflect the name change from Singapore to Shonan. Shonan in Japanese language means the shining south. Between February 1942 until August 1945, Botanic Gardens was put under the Museum Directorate and the staffs remained at work when the goods price increased to up to 500 times, albeit with similar salary. Arbit make you free. After the war ended, the work in the Botanic Gardens resumed and not even interrupted after Singapore's independence in 1965. To attract the public to visit and appreciate the botanical research, the plants are carefully created to make the garden presentable and attractive to visit, like this bunch of pandan leaves, the source of natural green food colouring. Previously, Cluny Road cut the garden into half, but the road was partially expunged, closed to all vehicular traffic and integrated as part of the extensive walkways in the garden. Arriving near Symphony Lake, the trees are carefully curated around the lake. This was supposed to be the location of a monument where the first rubber trees were planted back in 1876. It is difficult to find an obscure monument in a heavy rain. Instead, I found another monument, statues of Frédéric Chopin and his mother, a gift from Poland. Above the Symphony Lake is Palm Valley, where the palm trees stand tall around a lawn. On a clear sunny day, Palm Valley lawn is a good spot to sit down, relax, having a picnic or a date. Not on the rainy days though. At the end of the Upper Palm Valley Road is a square called Orchid Plaza. Wide and spacious, this square is the main entrance to the National Orchid Garden, opened in 1995. Unlike most parts of the Botanic Gardens, National Orchid Garden is a ticketed area. You need to buy a ticket to see the blooming orchids inside. Orchids are appreciated due to its beauty and uniqueness of each of its hybrid. Thanks to the extensive orchid research, Singapore is able to conduct the gesture as naming the new orchid hybrids after the foreign leaders, the so-called orchid diplomacy. Visiting dignitaries and selected celebrities often will be presented with a unique hybrid orchid bearing their name, such as Paravanda Nelson Mandela and Dendrobium Mahathir Siti Hasmah. Nearby Orchid Plaza is a tree and a monument where former President of South Africa Nelson Mandela stood nearby in 1997. Other than playing a role in diplomacy, Botanic Gardens play a key role in greening Singapore, one of the densest populated sovereign states in the world. In May 1967, a two-stage plan was unveiled to make Singapore a garden city, with flowers and trees and as tidy and littlest as can be. A policy that encouraged the greenery in the midst of a dense city. Even the highway median has hedges grown between the crash barriers instead of just steel crash barriers. Vanda Miss Joaquim, the winning orchid in the flower show 1899, was declared as the national flower of Singapore in 15th of April 1981. Due to better understanding of plant genus, which is why cutting the funding to science is a bad idea, the flower has been reclassified into a new name, Papilionanthe Miss Joaquim. Despite the change of genus of the parents of the flower from Vanda to Papilionanthe, the name Vanda Miss Joaquim is still widely used. It is very easy to pronounce Vanda Miss Joaquim than Papilionanthe Miss Joaquim. Americano. Up the hill is the bandstand, where a band plays the music every month until 1976. The band plays the orchestral music while the visitors leisurely stroll in the garden. Today, orchestra is no longer assembled at the bandstand. Instead, the orchestra plays at Shaw Foundation Symphony Stage near Symphony Lake. The White Gazebo was built in 1930 and becomes the popular photo spot for the newlyweds. As one of the most recognizable landmarks in the garden, the bandstand becomes the symbol of Botanic Gardens. Try Google Singapore Botanic Gardens and see what is the first picture appear on the result. The legacy and tremendous contributions of Botanic Gardens to the economy and history of Singapore, Malaysia and Southeast Asia region makes the garden worthy to visit. This place is hidden gem. On the 4th of July 2015, Singapore Botanic Gardens is enlisted as UNESCO World Heritage Site, the only place in Singapore with such a designation. What are the criteria that make Botanic Gardens a World Heritage Site? 1. Well-preserved British tropical botanic gardens with continuous use as the place of scientific research since 1849. 2. The center of propagation of rubber research and plantation. Other than the colonial legacy, Botanic Gardens preserve the legacy of the World War II period and Singapore after independence. Tucked in one corner of Botanic Gardens, there is a brick stairs that became a silent witness of World War II era. These bricks were made by Australian prisoners of war jailed in Changi during Japanese occupation between 1942 and 1945. POWs punched the arrow marks on the bricks as an act of defiance against Japanese occupation. The significance of the bricks were only known to the public years after the end of the war. As the stairs is located away from the main path, the arrows on the bricks are less prone to weathering due to the elements and shoe steps. As a result, the arrows can be seen clearly after more than 80 years. Rain certainly helped exposing the arrows to be clearly seen. At nearby Lawn E, there is an old tembusu tree or scientific name Fragaria fragrans that is depicted at the reverse side of 5 Singaporean dollar banknotes. Standing tall since the early years of Botanic Gardens, tembusu tree was chosen to symbolize Singapore as a garden city. The banknote is green as well, matched with the theme. To date, Botanic Gardens is the only UNESCO World Heritage Site in Singapore due to its role in reshaping the economy and the course of history. Not only the history of the Lion City but also the history of Malaysia and Southeast Asia as well. Without the extensive botanic research, there would be little understanding of what the richness of the tropical jungle could offer to the humanity. Without the madness of Matt Ridley and small experimental rubber plantations in Botanic Gardens, the history and landscape of British Malaya and later Malaysia and Singapore would be different than what we know today. There will be no rubber trees, no affordable shoes, no bata factory. Indians will be less likely to migrate to British Malaya, thus no roti paratha, no teh tarik in the morning and no muruku to enjoy. There will be no railway across the peninsula from Tanjung Pagar, no Singapore Railways even, no KTM, no Johor Causeway, no Victoria Bridge in Perak, no railway to the east coast of Peninsula, no railway all the way to Thailand, to Bangkok. And William Kelly Smith will never able to fund his opulent mansion in Batu Gajah, Perak, and the original east-west highway between Terengganu and Perak will never be planned, let alone built. Imagine if there was no rubber. The rubber trees that grow all across Southeast Asia, which started with just 22 rubber seedlings and promoted by a mad director. The journey ends at Tanglin Gate, the main gate of Botanic Gardens. There are parts of Botanic Gardens that I haven't visited this time due to weather, such as Marsh Boardwalk and the museum, perhaps in the next visit. If you want to visit Singapore Botanic Gardens, the gardens is open from 5 AM to 12 AM every day. By MRT, disembark at Botanic Gardens station on Circle Line and Downtown Line and take exit A to enter the garden via Bukit Timah Gate. To experience a grandeur entry via Tanglin Gate, take MRT Thomson East Coast Line Hotel to Napier Station and take exit 1. Tanglin Gate is nearer to the bandstand and National Orchid Garden than Bukit Timah Gate. There are bus stops near Tanglin Gate at Napier Road and near Bukit Timah Gate at Bukit Timah Road. By car, there are parking lots near Nassim Gate at Cluny Road, Children's Garden behind NUS Bukit Timah Campus and Tyersall Avenue. The admission into Botanic Gardens in general is free. You need to buy a ticket to enter National Orchid Garden though. Reference list in the form of books and articles as a reference to this video is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new about Singapore Botanic Gardens and its importance in shaping the region's history and economy. Thank you so much for watching again and see you in the next video.